Welcome to the Skoll World Forum on Social Entrepreneurship, coming to you live from Oxford, England. And now we're going to be talking about how technology can transform agriculture. And I'm delighted to welcome as a guest, Usha Bawale-Zaire. You are a pioneer in developing technology to transform farming. And of course, this is a really pressing issue, the challenge of feeding what we think is a growing population, some say 10 billion by 2020. Plus, at the same time, the other challenge of reducing greenhouse emissions. And in fact, these challenges are linked because agriculture now contributes about 15% of human greenhouse gas emissions. And in fact, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change warned that the world's food supply is already jeopardized. Now, you grew up in India at the time of food scarcity, and now you're an agricultural innovator, focusing your career on seeds and biotech. And in fact, you're the director and the chief technology officer of the Maharashtra Hybrid Seeds Company, started, that I've just found out, by your father, which is fascinating. Now, seeds have clearly been in your DNA for a very long time, and your youngest memory is of cleaning tomato seeds. So tell me, what for?
So when my father first started the seed company and didn't have resources, so I'm one of 5 sisters, and the 5 sisters, we would sit in a line cutting tomatoes, one of them pureeing tomatoes and sieving tomatoes and cleaning the seeds. So he would be able to test the new seed that he had developed to see if they perform better than what was earlier grown. So that is my, as a 4-year-old or 5-year-old, being the youngest, I had the last job of cleaning the seed and putting them in a packet. So,
did you have any understanding of what you were doing then?
No, it was just an activity, and I knew that my father would take us to the farm every now and then to see whatever it was that he was doing, or we'd tag along, and so that is, I just remember doing because that was what was required, so, but didn't understand what it meant.
And how did that seed of an idea and that seed of a passion develop in you?
So growing up, seed was all around me, and agriculture, of course, growing up in rural India where you could see the distress on the farm very clearly. I wanted to do something which helped with the farming situation, and always understanding or trying to understand how science can bring solutions for the challenges that presented itself. And so that's how I became interested in science in general, and studied microbiology when I was at university, and then went on to study agronomy during my postgraduate studies.
And you're very interested, if I'm not mistaken, in actually moving DNA into plants, and how this has been a really big innovation. Maybe you can explain, and at the same time I thought we'll draw a picture of how technology can transform agriculture as our kind of picture of our conversation, as you explain a little bit how it works for people who are not in your field.
Right.
So let's get the pens out, and let's think about that, about this DNA being brought into plants.
Right. So actually all plants have DNA, right? Because that's sometimes a misconception that not everything has DNA unless you put it in. So one of the key things that we're trying to do is to see how we can combine 2 different genetics or DNA compositions in the plant to create a new one.
Okay.
So if maybe a simple example is if you have a white flower and a red flower, and you make a cross with it, which is also moving DNA around, right? When you make a cross, you're creating new combinations. And so what results out of that cross is a pink flower, or maybe a dark pink flower, or a white flower itself. You don't know what the combinations would be. And then you make a selection to see how it is. So it's very simple. Or if you look at a tall person and a short person, and they have children, the possibility that the children could be tall or intermediate is very, very high, because again, you're making combinations. So
is that
that's very true, very true, exactly. And then when you look at the progeny of that red and green line now, then when the progeny of that, then they will segregate or fall into different combinations of that green and red. So it may not be completely exactly as it is that you see here, and you will get all types of combinations.
But, so anyway, when you're creating hybrids, you're bringing these two different DNAs together. But what you're doing is slightly different. How are you using technology to sort of speed up and make more efficient this hybridization process?
So what we have been able to do historically is to make the conventional combinations like this. But as science has progressed, we are able to identify what is that gene which causes the flower to be pink, or what is that gene which causes the flower to be red. And if you know what that is, and if you're looking for a pink or red flower, then you can introduce that particular DNA into a plant which does not have it, and then you will end up getting that color flower. So that is how, it's a very simple example, but for complex traits, for diseases and insects where you don't have a solution in natural resources that you have available, then transferring a piece of DNA or a segment of DNA.
How do you actually do that? Because DNA is microscopically small.
That's right. So what you do is that you first take all of the DNA out from the plant, from any particular tissue, and then it comes out like a small translucent pellet. Wow. Very, very small, like a bead almost. And then you cut it with different enzymes because you know where the gene that you are interested in is. And then when you do that, you can take that gene and put it in a vector, something which carries that DNA. And when I was in graduate school, we actually used to use a .32 caliber blank bullet. Wow. To shoot the DNA into the plant. So you can just imagine this force with which this DNA would travel to the plant tissue that you were targeting. And because of the impact, the DNA would go into the plant cell and by natural mechanism would get integrated into the host genome.
So would you say is that picture representative? And then I'm having this more drought-resistant or salt-resistant plant can then be in a better position to create food.
That's absolutely correct. And so with one of the other things that where we are using genes very, very much is using molecular breeding. And so where you just track the gene rather than move the gene around. So,
what do you mean track the gene? Explain to me what that means.
If you do a fingerprint, your fingerprint is different than mine. And if I wanted to make sure that my plants have your fingerprint, then I take the original fingerprint and I run all the progenies that we develop from different combinations and see which one has your fingerprint using DNA markers. So just like for pharmaceuticals or medical diagnostics, we're using DNA markers. Similarly, we do it for plants. And that's actually become a very big component in our plant breeding program, and it allows us to develop plants with more unique traits like drought tolerant or salinity or nitrogen use efficiency, which is really a direct contributor to the greenhouse gas emission based on nitrogen fertilizer application.
So therefore you use less nitrogen by genetically modifying these crops, and therefore because you're using less nitrogen it's much better for the environment because we're not causing greenhouse gases to rise at the same rate.
Right. So you either apply less nitrogen or the nitrogen which is applied is used more efficiently. So you have either of those combinations which becomes possible, but it doesn't have to be genetically modified. It can be done by molecular breeding. What I was saying, that you track the DNA which allows the plant to use nitrogen better.
But the work that we were doing here describing is about genetic modification, isn't it?
To a certain extent, yes, but genetic modification, all of these conventional methods as well as the new methods are all genetic modification. It is for the GMOs, as we call it, you are taking something from outside and putting it into the plant. That is a different type of genetic modification. But this also is genetic modification because you've just created a new combination.
But the one that people basically or think of as genetic modification when you're inserting DNA,
new DNA.
Yeah, it's not without controversy. In fact, in India, my understanding is that some of your new plants have not been able to be patented because of government concern about risks and safety surrounding them.
So in India, we have one GMO which is grown, which is cotton. So it's the insect-resistant cotton which is cultivated, and farmers have really liked the technology and adopted the technology very effectively. Another product which is there is BT eggplant, which is developed by us but is being grown in Bangladesh, but Indian government has not yet given clearance for commercial cultivation. But India does not allow plant patents in general, whether it's GMO or not. So it's not really GMO specific. We have plant variety protection which exists, and so that of course is followed by many organizations.
I mean, some people have concern about GM crops because some of them, for example, have, if the farmer gets a crop, the farmer is not able to yet use the seeds to plant another crop. He's forced to be, or she, dependent upon the company. And so you're forcing a dependency and therefore a need to buy certain specific other pesticides or herbicides in order for that crop to grow. And so that's some of the reasons that people have concerns around these products. How do you talk about this?
So we've been selling seeds since 1964. Just in our company, and of course many other companies doing the same. And the reason why the farmer comes back to buy the seed, and from much before GMOs, so the reason why farmer comes back to buy the seed is because they see value in it. And so what is that value? Value is either higher yield or disease resistance or grain quality.
But why can't the farmer take the seeds the same way you as a kid took those tomato seeds and then plant the crop the next year themselves?
So actually the seed that I was cleaning were hybrid seeds, and seeds were made from combination of two different parents. And so when you combine two different parents, you have what is known as hybrid vigor. And that hybrid vigor in subsequent generation will get less and less and less. And so the farmer is interested in maximizing the hybrid vigor. And that is why the farmer who plants hybrid seed comes back every season. Even the varietal seed which the farmer plants, after some time, the farmer is not able to maintain quality. And because of that reason, the farmer comes back to buy seed every 2 or 3 seasons, depending on the crop. So it's nothing new that GMOs have created, because the farmer has been buying seed over and over again. And if you ask that farmer that you keep your seed and plant it, and they'll say, no, I don't want it because I'll lose 10% of my productivity if I use my own seed in this particular scenario.
And what about the concern? I think it's important to address these concerns because
Right.
people will be curious. What about the concern around the loss of diversity? Because even though an individual farmer may be able to be more productive, as you say, he's incentivized, or she incentivized, to come to you and buy the seed each year to get maximum efficiency. As a whole, the whole community of biodiversity, which is for the good of all of us, is threatened.
Yeah, so if we look at brinjal or eggplant, which is a very popular vegetable in India, and if you you would have seen how many different uses of brinjal there are in India. So every 30-40 kilometers in India, you see a different type of fruit. Now, a different type of fruit or vegetable which the consumer is using, making bharta or making fried bengan or making
Sounds good.
yes, or a curry and so on and so forth. And for each type, they want a different variety.
Yes.
So it's either green or it's purple or it's 3 colors or it has thorns.
Yes.
Now, as a company, what we focus on is developing a product with those characteristics, but which yield better, which have more disease resistance or can use water more effectively.
But aren't you going to find the most efficient type of aubergine is green or yellow, and then go and share that very widely? As a company, surely you're incentivized to do that, and therefore people in a much broader community are going to be incentivized to buy that product rather than the previous diversity of different purple aubergine that they may have been planting before.
So that of course is one of the factors which is there is what the farmer sees as a market demand, and based on the market demand the farmer is willing to plant a certain type of variety. So in some cases where there's very small use, let's say some medicinal use for a particular variety, so unless the farmer is getting a premium for that, and if it's a very small acreage, then clearly as a company, it's very difficult for us to work on that for 500 acres only versus 10,000 acres and so forth. So that exists. But when if you take a consumer who wants green eggplant and they want a green eggplant which is long and slender, and if I give them a short and stubby eggplant, the consumer, even though it's green in color, is not going to buy it. So when we look at our offering in terms of diversity of products, then they have all of these combinations. So we might have 5 different products in the green segment, which will be round or slender or...
I get a sense that Indian consumers are far more picky on their aubergines. I've never seen so many different coloured aubergines in the UK. I can imagine that they might well be, in order to try and sort of satisfy all the enormous varieties of Indian dishes.
No, that's true. And, in some other crops, it may not be the case. So if you take rice, for instance, in rice, again, the grain quality is very critical. And so if you don't have the right grain quality, it doesn't matter how much it produces, the consumer doesn't buy it. And if the consumer doesn't buy it, the farmer doesn't grow it.
How much are you thinking on when you're making different types of rice in terms of the nutritional value of the rice?
So nutritional value has not been a big focus generally because there's in the marketplace there's no segregation of different qualities of rice. And I think that needs to change because we need to start thinking about, so we think about rice from cooking quality because that is what the consumer understands. But the consumer is not able to at this moment say that, oh, this particular variety of rice has higher iron content, so I should buy that, because that is not happening in the marketplace as on date. And so that is what we need to really work towards.
Certainly as a mother, when I go shopping and I think about, because I make my own bread, and I think about the different, using spelt or using kamut, and I'm doing it out of ignorance, but I kind of think of using more protein richer flours, more a variety of different flour in the bread I bake. And I think, it's just perhaps surely a good idea to become more aware and to start developing audiences and markets to want to consume these kind of products.
Absolutely. I think this is something that we have to really work on, and we have started doing it on a small scale at this moment, looking at different varieties of rice which not only have the cooking quality, which is a given, but then have nutritional elements which are enhanced in it, and how we can, so in case of sorghum or forage sorghum in particular, we have been able to develop material which is better for feeding to the animals, and they have a better quality milk, which is as a result of it because of the fodder quality. So the quality focus needs to come in much more overall in our sector. I feel that is not there today.
And what can be done? How can you encourage this change, which you think will be beneficial?
So we're starting to see a little bit of change. A lot of the things that we do are driven by market demand. And so as soon as the market starts demanding better quality, then immediately our research focus also shifts in those directions that we need to work on.
It's interesting because in the UK we now have a lot of products which are traffic light, meaning they have different colours on the product of a breakfast cereal to show how much fat it's got, how much sugar it's got, and how much fibre, but they're generally negative, not positive attributes. But it would be very interesting if products like rice could start to have positive attributes available, so consumers can make better choices to feed their families.
Yeah, and that is good, and we are starting to have in the supermarkets. You start to see some of this, but most of the purchasing in India still happens in the loose market.
In markets,
right, in loose market where there's either no packaging or no labeling, definitely. And so we need to create much greater awareness about the value, nutritional value that the product provides, and to be able to then move that really as an agenda forward, that they have better nutritious food.
And at the same time still being aware of the challenge of climate change, which is those two different big challenges that you are trying to come and finding a way to solve.
Yeah, I think the climate change, of course, as I say, is already here.
Yeah.
So what we need
we're not
to
going to
really
solve it, but in terms of reducing the footprint
right,
of
exactly,
agriculture.
exactly. And so what we are really focused on, and over the years, what we do is to test the material in many, many locations, right? So you test it in locations where there's very little water, and you won't provide any irrigation, and still see how the crop does. And so are the crops able to manage with very, very restricted water, or with have efficiency in terms of fertilizer use? So these are some of the things that we are working on to make sure that from 2-3 years from now, what we introduce is more climate hardy or climate ready than what has been in the past. So this is ongoing challenge, I feel, that we have to tackle. And wheat is, of course, one example where 5% of 5% loss because of temperature could mean that it's total devastation for the country in terms of supply.
Wow. Thank you so very much. Usha Bhatwala is there. Really fascinating conversation. And do join us in 1 hour 40 minutes, where we'll be hearing from Michelle, our Velo carpenter, talking about social entrepreneurship in South America. Looking forward to joining you then.